Okay, thank you all, the four of you, for coming to my my talk. As I was saying on the much coveted last slot of the day. So I'm going to talk about GitHub Copilot and how it can improve your job satisfaction. I'm Scott Morgan. I'm a doctoral student at Marymount University, just across the river, wherever direction I'm facing. I'm not from here, so I'm not sure where I'm at. Before we get started, I've also been in IT since 1995, so I'm an old guy, and I've done pretty much everything in IT in that amount of time. But the one thing I enjoy doing is writing code. But it's the one thing I don't get to do that much of anymore. So when I do get to do it, I like to enjoy it and increase my job satisfaction. So with that, I'm going to give you a little preview for Copilot Chat. So I've been working with the beta for Copilot Chat for some time, and it's a pretty neat little deal. And let me see if I can get it to work. There we go. So Copilot Chat, basically you hit Command-I, and wherever your cursor is, you type in something like implement FizzBuzz, or you're familiar with something like FizzBuzz, just standard stuff. And you can see it generated all this code for me. I didn't write any of that stuff. So, and then just to prove to you it worked, there's FizzBuzz, which is kind of useless really. So we're gonna reverse a string. So once again, type in reverse a string, code gets written for you. And I can accept that. And there's hello world reversed. Now we're going to kind of proceed with leet code here, and we're going to escalate this a little bit. So we're going to do palindrome checker next. And you can see now it starts to write just a little bit more code, right? So it's not simple things. It's doing more. Again, I didn't do any of this. This is all generated for me. And just to prove once again that it works, race car is a palindrome. So now I'm going to do something a little bit better, implement a quick sort. I got to be honest with you, I don't know how to do quick sorts or bubble sorts or any of those. So rely on Copilot Chat to do that for me. I've been doing this job for about 30 years. I've never written a sorting algorithm in my life. But there you go, there's that. So now we're going to do everyone's favorite job interview question, how to reverse a linked list. Now this one gets a little bit tricky because when I originally did it, it wanted to do it in C#, or in JavaScript, not C#. So I had to specifically say, implement reverse a linked list in a C#.NET console application. So it took me a couple of tries to get that one. But once you do, you saw all the code that it generated. Now this one's actually kind of neat. This is generating the abstract factory pattern in C#. I didn't write any of this mess. 15 years ago, this would have been really cool to have. I'd had to do all this stuff by hand and figure it out. So it's nice to have all that. But anyway, that's just a little preview of Copilot Chat. And now that I've kind of whet your appetite a little bit, let's talk about what is Copilot. How does it work? What are the building blocks used for AI code generation? How do you use Copilot as a pair programmer? What are some drawbacks to Copilot? And ultimately, why the four of you are in this session, how does it affect your job performance or your job satisfaction? So first of all, what is GitHub Copilot? Well, it's an AI-powered code completion tool. It's developed by GitHub in collaboration with OpenAI. It leverages machine learning, large language models. And the biggest thing to remember is Microsoft owns GitHub. Microsoft owns part of OpenAI. So what they did was they took these two technologies and put them together, kind of like if you've seen a Ziploc bag and lettuce. You put those two things together to create a cool new product. That's kind of what they did here with Copilot. So how does it work? So programmer writes code, and as you're writing code, requests are constantly sent to the Copilot service that then suggests lines of code and functions based on what you're doing. So the cool thing about this is if you're in VS Code doing this, the more tabs you have open, it's all contextual. So for example, if you have a tab open connected to, say, a SQL database, and you've run some queries against a table, then you have another tab where you want to create like a class. It'll actually assume that you want to create a class based on the table that you've been working with. And so it'll start to fill all that stuff in for you. So it saves a lot of time. It's pretty cool stuff. And there was a point when I was going through and doing this where it kind of was eerie because it felt like it was reading my thoughts almost. So it's a little bit powerful, but a little bit scary too at the same time. So next we're going to talk about the building blocks of job satisfaction and how Copilot can affect that. We're going to talk a little about the history of code generation, a little about the history of artificial intelligence, since this is an AI conference. We're going to talk about the space framework. And since I am a doctoral student, I have to talk about some job satisfaction theories. So first, we're going to talk about the history of code generation. So this is nothing new. It's been around since the 50s when Grace Hopper built the first compiler in 1951, the A0 compiler, which oddly enough, no one wanted to use at the time. Strange. Then in 1957, IBM released Fortran, which is widely considered the first high-level programming language. High level. When I was in college, I couldn't learn it, and they considered that high level at the time. Then in 1959, COBOL was released, and COBOL was to the business community what Fortran was to the scientific community. Because you guys look kind of young. Everybody know what COBOL is, at least? No. All right. COBOL programmer in the back. She even has her arm in a sling from compiling too many times. One more compile before lunch. My funny COBOL story is when I was doing the research for this, and I didn't realize this until a few months ago, the federal government said we need to have 3 different solutions for a business / insurance / finance / government programming language. They wanted to have a short-term, a mid-term, and then ultimately a long-term solution. COBOL was the short-term solution. And when it came out and was released, they didn't need the mid or the long-term solution because COBOL was so good. There is still COBOL code being written today, not by me, mind you, but by some people. Continuing along with code generation, IDEs, so, Visual Studio, etc. These generated code. If you were a Windows programmer in the 90s, these things would all generate the Windows code for you. You didn't have to know anything about what you were doing with that. I always joke around and say that Visual Basic turned me into a Windows programmer. And then in 1997, IntelliSense came out. And well, I don't know if that's technically code generation. It sure does help, right? And that's, when you hit the dot and the things pop up. That wasn't around before 1997. My first job, I sat in a cube and the people behind me had the namespaces all on their cubicle walls, and IntelliSense did away with that. There's no need for that anymore. You guys probably all know this since this is an artificial intelligence conference, but just very briefly, that traces its roots back to 1955 when John McCarthy did the Dartmouth conference, and that's when the term artificial intelligence was coined. Also, we want to talk about, when we talk about how, the building blocks of Copilot, we want to talk about machine learning, which is, a subfield of AI, and it enables computers to learn, improve performance. Main thing here is computers can teach themselves with machine learning. You don't have to program them. Just looking at data, they teach themselves. NLP is important for Copilot because you're going to interact with it in a sort of a chat type interface, right? So that's why you need NLP. And then ultimately large language models, which the letters LLM have been mentioned here about a bazillion times today. So we probably all know what those are. But unlike something like ChatGPT, Copilot's trained on large language models of source code, publicly available source code from GitHub, as opposed to just documents. So when we talk about developer job satisfaction, there's actually more to it than that. It's part of 5 things in the space framework. The space framework was developed by some researchers at Microsoft, and this is how to determine developer productivity. The first one, and the one we're interested in today, is satisfaction and well-being. How fulfilled you are. What's your morale? How comfortable are you in the tools that you're using, etc., things like that. Second one is your performance, and that can be the quality of your code, or I like to refer to it as the value that you're giving your customers. So it's not lines of code or anything like that. That's where the next one comes in. The A is activity, and that has to do with sort of the quantity of the work that you're doing. Code commits, pull requests, things like that. The C is collaboration. So in this day and age, you don't put a developer in an office by themselves and shove food under the door. You have to collaborate, work with the team. So how well you collaborate with others is an indicator of your performance. And then last is efficiency and flow. So your ability to work with minimal interruptions. I know in my job, I get interrupted. I actually did the research on this. I collected the data. I get interrupted every 8 minutes. So efficiency and flow is not good for me, but that is an indicator of job performance. And here are those theories that I talked about. Since we're a little bit short on time, I'm not going to go into any real detail on these theories, but Hertzberg's two-factor theory, the expectancy theory, the job character. Basically, what all this is just fancy speak for programmers don't like to do repetitive tasks. No one writes to write property sets and gets all day. And two-factor theory and job characteristics model basically tell you that exact same thing. So programmers are inherently lazy. Copilot allows you to not do that. Copilot writes all those property sets and gets for you, so you don't have to do that. So number 1 and number 3, your job satisfaction is increased with that one. The middle one here, expectancy theory, that's when maybe you don't know how to do something and you get a little bit of anxiety, at least in my case, a lot of anxiety about how the heck am I going to go do this? Well, Copilot helps you with that. So let's just say you're going to access an SFTP server and you don't know how to do that. You can actually ask Copilot to do that for you, and it'll generate that code, and it'll fill in like username and password with placeholders and the URL with placeholders and that sort of thing. So that's the job satisfaction theories bit, and I'll just kind of move on. So now let's talk about taking flat with Copilot. So how does Copilot work kind of, in detail, and what is it? Well, who in here knows about pair programming? Anybody? All right, rock on. So pair programming is this concept that you have two developers working on the same piece of code. All right, all right. Problem with that is it's a little bit tough to do because you got to coordinate with, two developers, one wants to go to lunch and this and that. Plus, you have to eat and sleep in there sometimes. So Copilot can be a virtual pair programmer. So Copilot doesn't sleep. Copilot doesn't eat. Copilot never stops. It's coming after you. It's going to write code with you. A good friend of mine and a coworker said that this is just like having a pair programming for introverts. And most programmers will know what I mean by that one. So Copilot tends to work in 2 modes, code acceleration mode and code exploration mode. And it doesn't have like a toggle switch or anything. It's just kind of how you're using it. So acceleration mode is when it's writing those property sets and gets for you. It helps you do your job faster, right? Therefore, increasing your job satisfaction. Exploration mode is what I was talking to you about earlier. I don't know how to access a REST API. How do I access the Spotify REST API? And it builds that for you, or at least a stub for that. 5 minutes, thank you. All right. And then lastly, this all affects your productivity. This actually, there's been a lot of studies with the space framework tied to this from Microsoft and GitHub, and it does increase your productivity. Now, there are some drawbacks. It's the greatest thing ever, right? Well, it's pretty good, but there are some drawbacks. First of all, there are security concerns. So does that mean Copilot stinks at security? Nah, doesn't mean that at all. But what is considered a security best practice right now in 20 minutes may be antiquated and outdated because hackers are out there and they are smart and they're doing stuff. And you have to always be aware of what your code's doing and the security concerns with it. Code quality. In my experience with Copilot, it's actually really good, but I keep my prompts really small. I generate small pieces of code. As you start to build larger pieces, if you ask it to build entire programs at one time, that's when you tend to run into some code quality issues and you wind up having to go back and fix it. And sometimes it'll take you longer to actually fix it than it would have if you just done it yourself to start with. So that's my experience with it, is I keep things very short, very concise. Then a lack of defensive code. So checking for nulls and things like that. Yeah, Copilot's not great at that. It's okay at it, but for the most part, you just want to get that main piece of code written, and then you can go back and kind of touch it up a little bit after that. So I have got probably 2 or 3 minutes left. These are just some screenshots of me generating some code. You can see the part in gray there is what Copilot is suggesting. And I can creating a stored procedure there and move on to this one. Again, as you say, create a stored procedure called insert weather. I don't know if you all are familiar with SQL or not. It doesn't really matter, but as you start to type here, it'll fill this stuff out in gray. All you gotta do is hit tab to accept it and move on. For my DBA loves this. When he's creating new table sets and things, instead of like half a day, he's done in 20 minutes now. So he really loves that sort of thing. The REST API I was mentioned earlier is right here. And that's a get weather API. Got it? Okay. And then just to wrap up real quick, what we talked about today is, for my Portal friend, my Portal 2 people out there, is the cake a lie? Anybody? No? Okay. You all are too young. You got it. Okay. Yeah, my son wrote that part. No, what we talked about today is what is Copilot. Hopefully you know what that is now, how it works. For this guy, he just showed up and already knows everything. What are the building blocks of AI code generation? How to use it as a pair programmer? What are some drawbacks? And then ultimately, how does it affect your developer job satisfaction? Yes, sir. So I originally used both together because ChatGPT does a little bit better job of generating a lot of code. You can copy and paste that in. But there's a new thing called Copilot Chat, and then you won't need to have that ChatGPT window open anymore. And that's in beta. I think it's going to be released sometime soon, but check that out. For some reason, it's supposedly like a 3-month waiting list. I don't know. I got it in like 2 weeks. I think there's a thing like when you're doing these little speaking gigs, they think you're somebody important or something. I don't know. They don't know that I'm just some guy, right, from Central Texas. Don't know what I'm doing, but yeah. So I was using. I guess the long answer. That's the long answer. The short answer is I use both, but with Copilot Chat, I don't have to anymore. So another question. Oh, we're going to always be needed because the way I see it is it's a tool, right? And if you go back to like, what was it Marvin Minsky talked about, the real beauty of this stuff is not necessarily computers replacing humans. It's how a computer and a human can work together to do things better. So I think the job might change a little bit. I can tell you after working in IT for as long as I have, I'm kind of ready for that. I could use a break, to be honest with you. And we're so short-staffed, really, in general in the industry that I think it'll be a welcome thing. More questions? Thank you all. That's a great question. And for those of you that didn't hear, she's asking about security concerns. And number one, security concerns in the code itself. I think I'm out of time, but I think they'll come get me right when I'm okay. And then the second part is, if I think I'm hearing you right, is how do we know that Copilot's not sending information like my code back somewhere, right? Is that what you're asking? And the short answer is, I don't think we know that just yet. So how can you? I've actually done a focus group with a group of people, and some of them worked in like a credit union or fintech, a bank, things like that, and it's banned. There's none of that going on there. Yeah, they're like, don't even have that on your computer and come in here with it because we don't know what it's going to do yet. So yeah, I wish I had a good answer for you, but unfortunately, the answer I have is not a good one. More questions? I think it's $100 a year. So it's, I mean, yeah. So it's really not like if you're a professional coder, it's not that much bread to drop down for something that's going to save you quite a bit of time, in doing it. So it's pretty cool. And like I say, it really turns me into a developer, which I haven't been in a long time. So. All right. Well, thank you all for coming to my talk. If anyone has any questions, I'm on the app, and yeah, hit me up. So thank you all. Have a good rest of the conference.